Hi, let's get started. I hope you can see my screen. Someone can reply.
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah, thank you, Himanshu. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Atharv. I'm from Maharashtra, and this is my roll number. So, if you have any doubts within uh, this session, you can directly mail me or even mail CS Club for your queries, and they'll be answered. You can also put your doubts in Discord server, and you'll get prompt reply there also. So today's session is on Flask, and so let's see what we'll do in this today's session. So I'll basically tell you what Flask is, and then we'll be creating a basic application and deploying it to Heroku. So in this session, you'll be creating a to-do app list kind of thing that will be linked to a database. It will be CRUD app. So it will have basic functionality like create, update, and delete, and it will be hosted on Heroku at the end, and that's the complete flow of the app. We'll start with creating a first basic app, and then we'll add templates and static engines. We'll learn how to connect database, different ways to connect database, and then what is a CRUD app, and then the advanced app, creating the app. So okay. About Flask. What is Flask? So Flask is a micro web framework written in Python. This is the official definition of Flask. Now to decode it, what is a framework? So framework is so if you have followed Python, the previous session taken by Nitish in Edith for CS Club. So it discussed things called libraries, which are basically pre-written code that you use in your code. Those are same like if for most of you can relate it to C++ libraries like standard lib. Standard lib is a library, standard library. Its name is standard library. So basically, it is something that you import in your code and then use bits from that code into your code. That's called a library. And what a framework is, it would be a pre-written set of code, and then in that you'll put your code. So there'll be a basic structure given, and in that you'll modify it to suit it to your needs. That's a framework. So library, you import it. Framework, you write into it. So why is it micro? So basically, Flask and Django are the two major web frameworks for Python. Now, why is Flask micro? Because Django, if you don't know, you should know. Like you don't need to know. Uh, for Flask, you don't require any additional libraries. Flask can create a web application on its own, while Django requires multiple libraries that need to be imported. Django is a big framework, and it's a more major framework. Flask is micro. It can be used to create a smaller app, and it can be set up in literally 2 minutes. You can create an app in Flask in 2 minutes. So what can it do? Flask is simple, but you can scale it to do anything. So basically, if you think you can create a Flask app in 2 minutes, and you can add so much stuff into it that you can create anything from Flask. So like so if you like to see how it can be scaled, Reddit has Flask backend. Netflix has a little bit of Flask backend. Cred or Trivago also has Flask backend. So that's how much it can be scaled, and it could be as simple as maintaining a simple Hello World app that just shows Hello World app. So how is it different from Django? As I told you, Flask is micro. Django is a major, which has other libraries dependent, which is dependent on other libraries. Flask is simple. It can be scaled to become as big as you want. So setting up the workflow, we'll use something called pipenv. So if you attended the previous session, in Python, we told you about environments. So basically in Python, your entire system is divided into smaller virtual environments in which the libraries are downloaded. So there'll be a big your laptop, and then in your laptop there'll be smaller uh, sectors called virtual environments in which are separate from each other. So you can install, say, ML libraries in one virtual environment, WebDAV libraries another, and something else in another. So that's how virtual environments are. PPNV is an easier way to manage virtual environments. You can also use VNV or virtual environment, which is the official Flask, which is the official Python environment. Installing Flask will install Flask using pipenv, and then we'll create a first Hello World app. So let's get coding. So I'll first create a folder. Let's call it Flask. I'll open this. I use VS Code for coding, so I'll open it in VS Code. Any doubts so far? You understood what Flask is?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for the reply. Yeah. So as we discussed, the first step would be to set up the pipenv. So to install pipenv, what we'll do is pip install pipenv. This is the command to install pipenv. It's already installed in my system, so I'll just do pipenv shell. This is what you'll use to create a virtual environment for Python using pipenv. Now that will create a virtual environment. Someone is trying to join. Okay, now as you can see, using pipenv shell, our environment has been created. Now, yeah, so after creating our environment, our next task was to install Flask. So to install Flask, you'll do pipenv install Flask. So to install any library in pipenv, you just use this pipenv install and then the library name. So if I wanted to install NumPy, it would be pipenv install NumPy. It will go on to install the library and then manage its own, because it maintains this file called pip file, in which all the libraries that you installed are written here. So you can transfer it to another machine and it knows what is required for this. You'll see it when we are deploying. So we have installed Flask. Let's create our first application. So the application could be as simple as app.py, and in that I'll just import from. So since Flask is a library, I'll import the Flask object from that library. I'll just set up my environment. No, it shouldn't show that. Yes. Now that's how you import Flask. Flask, this is a library. This is the main class that we'll use for the app. So most of you have studied C++, so it's the same thing, classes and objects. So app will be an object of this Flask class. So to create the app, you'll do app is equal to Flask, and here you can name the app. But since I'll just disable my copilot. Yeah. Now you can put the name of your app here. Most of the times you'll use something called the magic keywords. These are magic keywords in Python. So this is name, annotation, built-in, caged. So these all are predefined variables for your Python. Now name will just be the name of the file. So specifying name is same as specifying app. That's it. Your app has been created. You can just do Flask run to run the app. Yep, your app is live. There won't be anything to show because you don't have anything, right? So the next thing you'll create is something called views. So views would be basically the routes. So to create that, let's not use multiple files. That could be confusing. Like generally, when you are using when you are creating a bigger app, you'll use multiple files so that it is easier to manage. But here, since we want to keep it simple, we'll use the same things. So for creating a route, what you'll do is let's say I create an index route and it just returns hello world. Now I have this function. Whenever index is called, hello world will be returned. This is the simplest function possible. Now I need to map it with some URL, right? So this is the function, and how will you map it to URL? So to do that, you'll use a decorator. A decorator is something which is applied onto a function to give it additional capabilities. You don't need to know what decorator is. You can read about it, but it's as simple as writing add app.route here. So basically, this tells that add something to this index function so that whenever this route is called, index function is called, and hello world is written. Now, if you go here and reload, okay, give me a second. So I just exported Flask environment as development so that whenever I change some file, automatically it's rebuilt. Everything will be rebuilt and my changes will be active. Now, if I reload it, it should show hello world. Yeah, that's your basic app. It could be as simple as that. Now, let's say you wanted to run a script. Let's say you have some big script that outputs something based on the calculations, and you don't need to interact with it. You just want to see its results. That's where Flask comes in. Like our mail mentioned that Flask can be used to run your scripts, right? So this is how you'll do it. Let's say you wanted to make a script for giving how many COVID cases are there today. And to do that, you use some library which returns the number of COVID cases. So let's say import library, import COVID. COVID is our hypothetical library, which gives you a number of cases. You'll just do return COVID dot number of cases. And that's it. This will return you some integer hypothetically, and that would be shown onto this URL whenever you visit this. So you don't have to run the script again and again. You can just deploy it to Heroku, and whenever you want, you can just go to this URL and you can see it. That's how easy and powerful the Flask is. Now coming back to our original case. Yep, that's our Hello World app. It's active. Give me a second. Yep. Any doubts so far? You understand our first view? That's the basic application that you can create. Any problems so far? The good number of people have turned up. That's good. EC21. So the first years. Nice. Okay, so I assume you don't have any doubts so far. Next thing, so you have this, right? Now, this is basic HTML that will be written. So if I go to view source, this is the only thing that is written, right? Now I could add something to it that will make it so this string will be evaluated as an HTML. So now if I reload it, you can see there's H1 here. Now if I reload it, it's a heading now. So basically this is evaluated like an HTML. Now it wouldn't be wise to write your HTML code here, right? So that's where you use something called templates. Coming back to the flow of our app, we created our first app. Now we need to create templates. So to create templates, you'll create a folder called templates. And then let's say you have index.html. So in this, let's create some basic HTML. You don't need to know this. You can just do so if I open this app now, so if I open this HTML now, you can see this is the HTML page that it shows. Now what I want to do is make that let my app know that whenever I want to whenever I visit this that HTML file should be called. So to do that, I'll use something called render template. So this is what our template is, and you'll use. Okay, I'll import a separate so it would be easier to understand for everyone. Render template. So that's how you'll render the HTML template. Now render template, and the name of template goes here. Now if I reload this, I should get that. Yep. So that's what it was called. Any doubts so far? So since this was named templates, Flask actually knows that this is the default directory to look for, and it will go there. Any doubts so far? No doubts? Good. Yeah, some doubts. Himanshu?
No, I was saying no.
Yeah, okay. No, thank you. Next thing you'll do is, okay, so let's add some more stuff to it. Let's say I wanted to add a picture to it. I have this picture. Say sample.png. I create a new folder for it. Static. So these are the static files. Static files are something that don't change whenever the app is reloaded, that don't need to be evaluated. Okay, let's not go to static right now. We'll use something called templating. So so far you just wrote an application, right? But what would be the use if you have to write everything every time, right? So that's where blocks come in. Templating blocks are there. Something called templating blocks. So I'll create something called base.html, and this is what my base.html will be. In the base.html, so every file will have this part. Okay, so this part would be different. Maybe I'll add some more to the head, like some CSS scripts. And body would be different, right? There could be a nav bar here for everything, and then a different body. So to retain this, to not have to write it again and again, so don't repeat yourself. That's a concept in coding. So to not do that, we'll use something called template blocks. Template blocks is basically injecting your code into some other code. So this is your code right now. Now I'll just put here a block called so this is a Jinja syntax, like Ninja. It's called Jinja templating. This is what Flask used to write dynamic HTML. So block head, and then end block. So I know that head block will start here, and there'll be some content, and then the block will end. Similarly, I'll have a body block. Yeah, so head would be different, body would be different. That's right. So I created two blocks for them. Now in my index.html, since this is the same, this is the same, only this part is different, right? So I should keep only this part, only what is different, and I need to somehow get everything else from the base.html. So to do that, I'll basically extend the base.html. Extend means just whatever is there in base.html, get it here. Extend base.html. Okay, that's done. So now, if you just load this, already the hello world page loads that one part, right? So unknown tag extend. Something is wrong. Extends. Extends. So you see, we extended this. Now base.html, this index.html itself shows the base.html. But we don't have body and anything. And we have this. But it doesn't know where this will go. The places for it to go are this block and this block, right? But we don't know where it will go. So I'll just do the same thing. Block body. So this part will go here. Closing it here, closing it here, and then ending the body part, ending the body block. If you are doing it with me, it would be very easy to understand. And if someone is doing with me, just tell me so that I'll go slower. Okay, now you have body block. So basically what it'll do is, it'll pick this up and put this here. So basically that's what will happen. Now let's check what happens. You see, that part was injected here. And if you reload, you'll see everything here. Now whatever I'll add to base will also come there. Navbar came here. And now I can create multiple files without having to write everything, right? So let's say index2.html. I'll just do the same thing, extend page.html, and start my body block and the body block, and type some content between. Now if I go to, I don't know where it is, right? So just create another route to it. You can create multiple routes. So make sure you don't have the same route, or else it would create problems. So index2, index2 will return index2.html, and /2 would be the route for it. So if I go to /2, there's navbar and there's the content, right? So if I do the source for /2, there's navbar. This was added in this base, and this is the only thing we wrote, and we got everything else, right? Yeah. So we only wrote this one and got everything else from the base.html, right? So that's templating for you. Now, let's say you want to pass some variable to templating. Now, you wouldn't want your templates to be like static, right? That doesn't make sense. You could directly write HTML for it. Let's say you want something like, I'll ask for a name. Let's say the name is Atharva here, and it should go to the template. And just say name is equal to name. This is how I'll pass it. Now, a better way to do is content is equal to then index dictionary. This is a better way to do it, but since we have only smaller number of parameters, it would be fine. Now we'll pass name as name, and then in index.html, I can just use this instead of this. What I'll do is name. Now notice the difference between this one and this one. So these were the functions, the keywords. This block is a keyword, right? You know what keywords are from C programming. So for loop or something, while all those are keywords, and this is an identifier variable. So in those, you'll use this one, 2 brackets, and for keywords, you'll use a bracket and a percentage sign. So if I now go to my index.html, not 2.html, index.html, see hello Atharv. Now it doesn't make sense to have something static passed on as a variable. If like I could directly just go there and type Atharva because every time it's gonna come same. So to do with that, what you'll use is parameters. So for parameters, this is the syntax for parameters. And since name is coming from the route, you'll put name as variable for this, and that's how it will work. Now we changed a lot here, a little, but conceptually it is a lot. So basically we added this part. Now what it says is a string is expected, which is a name, and that would be passed to this function, which would be passed to this template. Nothing is changed here, so you don't need to focus on that. Focus right now on this one. So what it said, string name, and these greater than and less than signs, these are what you'll specify it to be the parameter and not a string. So basically, if you remove this, it will just expect string colon name that as a route. But here you'll have a dynamic route. Now it will just say, if I put ATH, str doesn't exist. Yeah, ATH. Now whatever I'll type in here will be reflected there. That's what it does. So if I type Himanshu, it will go there. So basically what happens is it takes this route, maps this slash Himanshu to this slash string name. It says, okay, this is the name and it is a string. I'll pass that to this function, index name, and that will be passed to the template. Now, if let's say I wanted to modify it to something like name dot, say I want the name in complete capital case, I just say name is equal to name dot upper, and now whatever I'll do, it would be in capital. So if I had this one also, it would still come Himanshu. So basically, that's how the parameters work. Okay, now that's our basic app templates, static content. Now let's start creating the CRUD app. So that in itself only I'll explain how to connect the database. Now it's gonna go a little bit more tough because so far we only had what 10-20 lines of codes and we did a lot, right? We had parameters, we had dynamic routes, and that's the most of what you'll do in web dev. Like, for the static part, something that doesn't require backend and dynamic content. Give me a sec, I'll silence my phone. Yep. Now let's connect to the SQL. So basically, for 6th semester, you're in 4th semester. So yeah, so second years would have DBMS, right? So in that you use SQL databases. Same thing will be used here. So to use SQL, we'll install Flask SQL Alchemy. Give me a sec. Let me just confirm it. The library name is Flask-SQL Alchemy. SQL Alchemy. I hope the spelling is right. Yep, it is right. So SQL Alchemy is basically the interface between your Python and SQL. So it's a library. So basically, I told you, right? Flask in it doesn't have any libraries installed. You'll add on to it and create anything you want. So you could add any library to it. You can even add ML models to it, and then you'll show the output through Flask. So basically, as I said, as I imported the COVID library and checked COVID number of cases today, you could have something like ML, and then you'll just take in some parameter from the user and then show the output right on the web page. You don't need to run a script or anything. It could be used by a novice. Anybody who can use browser can use it. That's where the Flask comes in. So at the end of the session, I'll show you some applications that I have created in Flask for daily uses. It's taking a lot of time. Any doubts so far? Okay, it's installed. It will go on locking, but we can now use it. So let's import Flask SQL Alchemy. From Flask SQL Alchemy, import SQL Alchemy. It still doesn't know that it exists because it is using ppm. Let's wait for one more second. No doubt so far, right?
No.
Okay, forget it. Ignore this error for now. It will go away as soon as the locking is complete. Now we have imported SQL Alchemy, right? So what Flask uses is app.config. So everything about your app is stored in app.config. It's a dictionary, and everything is stored in that. So whatever dependencies you have, whatever templates you have, whatever configurations you have, everything is stored in app.config. So I need to add the SQL database to the config. So I'll add this key with the predefined key that is used, database URI. What the value of it will be SQLite colon 3 slashes. 3 slashes are for relative path. So when I say / test.db, the test.db will be created somewhere here. And if I say one more slash and then test.db, then it will be created to whatever absolute path I give. Absolute and relative path, maybe you'll understand it. Even if you don't, it's no problem. So let's put as to do absolute path, relative path, and 4 times slash would be absolute path. Absolute path is like basically if I go here, if I say copy path, it will show me the path relative to the complete path from my the base of my file structure. And if I say copy relative path, it will show the relative path to the file. So it's just app.py here. This is like saying the hostel is in the college and specifying where the college is. So that's the basic difference. Now, SQLite is a file-based database. So the MySQL or PostgreSQL, all of them are server-based databases. SQLite will be simple file. You can share that file anywhere, and the database will be transported by it. So the file is limited to itself. That's what SQLite is. Then, so to connect the DB to to connect the database to app, we'll just do SQL Alchemy and then app. So SQL Alchemy is the class that takes in the app that you have, and based on the config, it will create initialize the database and set it to the DB variable. Now, coming back to so let's say I want to add something to the database. So what to do that, I'll do db and dot session. So in database, you have sessions. So when every time you want to do something with database, a new session is created. And if something goes wrong in that session, the session is deleted and the database goes back to when like nothing happened. So it doesn't change directly, it changes in a session, and when everything goes right, then it changes itself. So basically it looks ahead, sees if it is working. If it is working, then attach it to me. And until then, don't attach. So in the session, I'll do add. Okay, we don't have a model yet. So just let's create a table in the database. So we'll create a task table. But since we are using a to-do app, let's create a task table. It would be model, so it would inherit from db.model. db.model would have basic functions like how to deal with it, how to add to it, how to delete from it, and how to register it to your database and stuff. In that, what you'll do is specify what columns you have. So what columns I have one column called ID. I have another column called content, and the third column would be date, when it was created. So that's basic 3 things you have in any to-do task, right? So ID is just for the database purpose, so that you have something unique to specify to a task. Now, to do this, this is a basic syntax for it. It would be a db.column, and since it is an integer, it will be db.integer. So this is basically declaring the function, declaring the column. It's the same thing as declaring a variable in C++. Basically, you're doing the same thing, since it is supposed to know what it would have beforehand, so that it can create database and schema for it. So if it is going over your head, you'll understand it as you start using it. So I'll set it as my primary key. If you'll probably would have heard about this primary key thing. It's basically something that I'll use to identify a row in that database. Now, content would be db.column. It would be a simple string, db.string, and size of string is to be mentioned. Let's mention is at 256 KB, 256 letters, and we don't want it to be false, right? We don't want something without a task without details. So you can't just do something at some time. You need to know what it's to be done to do it. And last thing would be db.column, db.date time, and you don't want to set your date, right? So it should manually automatically take the date from when you click add. So our app is gonna look like it will have a form, and whenever you click submit, a new task will be created. So whenever you click submit, it should automatically get the time. So you'll say default is equal to date time dot UTC dot UTC now, and so for that we'll date time import date time. Yeah, okay. So date created would be taken directly from the automatically from UTC now. UTC now will just give the current date as per UTC. Yeah, that's your table for it. Okay, that's it. Now you have your database linked. Now you have your table. The next thing you are gonna do is add the data, register the database to the file. So to do that, let's see if it runs properly. Any errors so far? No errors. It does some error. Should be named. Got nullable is equal to false. Some problem is there. Can someone spot anything?
17th line.
Yeah, nullable. Spelling was wrong. Thank you. That's it. Now you see, SQL Alchemy is called, and this is a standard error. You can just ignore it. It's a deprecation warning. So Flask bb init. Which command? Okay, let's do it simpler way. Python 3 from Flask import app from Python 3 from app import db dot create auth. Okay, now it created this SQLite file. As you can see, it will have the column there. Now let's say if I want to add something to it, so I'll just do db.session.add. Let's not go there right now. So yeah, so far we have created our database. Now we have to create forms so that we can use it, right? So to do that, let's create first index dot our first index function. It would be basically, now you have post and get methods on HTTP, right? So basically, whenever you send something to the on a page, it would be called a post method. Whenever you get something from the page, it will be called get methods. So you'll add that app.route. This is from the previous only. The next thing you'll do is methods is equal to post and get. Okay, so these two methods would be, okay, sorry. These two are the methods that are applicable. Now, if request, so whenever whenever this function is called, a request will be generated, right? So based on this decorator, extra things were added to this function so that it could be made workable. So you just say a request.method. If the request.method is post, this would mean that some form filled, add new task. We'll pass it for now. Else means it would be get request. So if it is a get request, we'll just do get all the tasks and display. Now to display the task, I'll use a template. Render template will modify our index.html itself. and I'll pass in a variable called tasks is equal to tasks. So what my task is, so let's define temporary task. So task would be a dictionary, and it would have an ID. Would have these keys, ID. It would have content. And this is my dummy task. So this is not how the task would look like, but this is basically how the task is, the format of task. Date created would be, let's say, date time dot UTC. Okay. Task is equal to task. Now we have to modify our index.html to display that task. So to do that, I'll do h1 tasks, and I'll just display the task. So let's separate the task by a horizontal row, and I'll display the task here. So to do that, I'll just do, since it's a variable and a dictionary, I'll have tasks, and in that I can put ID. Let's say it as, you don't need to see the ID, right? Because ID is something for managing backend. Task.content, and that would be done on, let's put done on task dot this dot content date time, date created. Now let's run it. I need a PNV shell. So now it should be run, because I wasn't in the virtual environment, so it didn't know what Flask is, because Flask is limited to this virtual environment. Internal server error. No attribute method. Why? Oh, we didn't get request from, I don't know how that was imported. So we'll import the request from this one. So since it's a Flask request, it would be imported from this one. Export Flask environment development, so that it is auto reloaded whenever I change something. Now let's see. Okay, task is undefined because I made it a single task. So task. Yeah, this is my dummy task on built-in method UTC. Type this. So I could just date created piece.html content app UTC. Now I'll call this function. Should give me, yeah, that's the current time and date. So yeah, this is my dummy task. Now get is done. I basically need to get this, but this is to be done. So I'll create a form. I'll add form to this. Now, since you have tasks, I'll just put a form here. Any doubts so far? Is it understandable? Considerable amount of people is left, so I think it's going good. Any doubts so far for anyone?
No.
Good, no doubts. Thank you. So I'll just create a form real quick. Let's just ignore the styling. Form action would be / since we are sending it to this method, right? Index. So it's route index. You could also put something like URL for, but let's not go there. I don't want to overcomplicate it. I already feel it's a little too complicated. Method is equal to post. So form action would have method post, and you only need one content from the user, right? You only need input text box. Input colon text. Input colon text. The name would be content. ID you don't need, but you can just put it, and then there'll be input, submit. Yeah, this is autocomplete, just to avoid the redundant typing. So yeah, this is your form. Let's see how it looks like. Not found. Yeah. So that's your form. Now you don't. Okay, this is not from that. Yeah, this is your form. So whenever I put something, I press add, it would be gone to that. And since for a post request, we don't have any valid thing, so it will return pass. So it is saying that, oh, I didn't get anything. So to validate the pass, what you'll basically do is create the, now you have the task at hand. You'll just put it there, put it in the database. So to do that, what you'll do is, so task was in your request. So let's say task content is equal to request dot form in the request, the form that was submitted, and get content ID from. We said that a name was content, right? That comes here. The ID doesn't come here. Name comes here. Content, and then to create a new task, you'll say new task is equal to task. This is the constructor for the class task, and the content would be content. That's it. Everything else is got being taken by default. Since it is a primary key, it will auto increment it to get something out of it. Now what we'll do is we'll try to put it, so it's exception handling in Python. Whenever you are doing something to database, it should always be in try catch block, because if something goes wrong, you have to reload the database and go back one step. So you'll just say add new task db.session.commit. So basically you say add this task into the database and commit it. And if something goes wrong, you do return, let's say H1, and there was an error. Okay. So basically that's it. That's, you got your form, you created a new task out of it, added it to database. So now let's go back to it. Add task. Me and my spelling mistakes. Task index valid response. Okay, so we didn't have any return statement if the Flask, if this was done right. So we'll just do return, and we'll redirect them to same thing. So like request will also import redirect. Basically it says that go back and call this method again. So I'll add this task, and it was added. So it would be there in my SQLite file. Now to get all the tasks, this is like just a dummy task I created, right? To get all the tasks, what you'll do is task is equal to do task is equal to task dot query. So basically you'll query the database table. You'll query the table. So if you have learned SQL in your lab, it would be something like select star from table name. That's, you need all of them, right? So that's it. So query and dot all. That's all your tasks. Now since it's tasks, now this will return a list of tasks, right? So because I've ordered all of them, it would return a list. So to how would you render the list here? So you'll just do a for loop. Now this is where the templating comes handy. You don't have to, you can generate content through templates. You don't need to know how many tasks were there. You could just use a for loop. Now, since for is a keyword, you wouldn't use this one. Instead, you'll use the percentage signs. So we'll say for simple Python for loop for task and tasks. Now, since we had the same thing, we don't need to change anything else. We'll just say and for. That's it. It's done. Yeah. Okay, something is wrong here. Date created. Okay, let's add a break after that. After every task, you will put. Since we added it multiple times, and task.date created was not given. Okay, let's just put it here. We'll forget about it. We'll do something about it later, or can we do
At 19, line number 19.
Yeah, the spelling was create and not created. So yeah, I don't want to change the database schema again, so I'll just change it here. So task date create, that's your thing, and that's the thing. Now you could format it maybe dot strp time. I don't know if the function is correct. Modulo h p slash modulo m slash modulo y modulo h modulo m. Two given. What were the two arguments given? strf type. Yeah, it was right. So yeah, we created these two times. Since it's UTC, it is showing that. Okay, so we created our task. Now let's say I add something, deploy on Heroku. Add a task. It shows me here. Okay, so we are done with our CRUD application. We still have to do the delete one, right? So let's create one more method to delete it. Delete will get a task ID, and it will just do task dot. Now, since we are working on database, you'll have to put it in try catch. Try task is equal to. Okay, there's a better method called get or 404. So if it is a, so basically database tries to query the object, and if it is not found, it will just show a 404 page. So task is equal to task dot query dot get or 404 ID. So basically that's it. You'll pass in the primary key here to get it. If it is not found, it will just return 404. So you don't need to handle that. Now to delete it, since we are now operating in database, you'll have to use try catch. You'll say db.session.delete, and you'll pass in the task that is to be deleted. And you say db.commit. You'll also have to do db.rollback so that the database goes db.session.rollback, so that your whatever commands you did on the database are reverted back, and the database thinks like it didn't happen. So you'll do db.session.commit and accept db.session.rollback and db. Okay, return. Same thing, error. That's it. And if the delete was successful, you'll just do return redirect redirect them back to the home page. That's it. That's your delete. Now I'll add app.route to this one. I'll say delete, and I'll just get the ID from here, int ID. Now for every task, I'll just put the ID here. So after the task, I'll create a button here. So to create a button, I'll have to put this in form, or I can just put a form here. So form action would be /delete. Action won't be delete. Action would be nothing, I guess. Just give me a second. Since we are calling to the same thing, we'll have to put action as this one. And method would be post only, but it doesn't matter. Anything will happen, it would be post only, since we are not checking it on the view side. So only the input would be submit button, which would have value of delete. Okay, instead of a form, since we have it as a route, it would be, so basically whenever this route is called, this will happen. So all you need to do is create a button which has a link to the, give me a sec. An anchor link for /delete question, and here it would be task.id. Yeah, that's it. I'll put it delete here. So whenever I click on delete, this route would be called, and this after this route, the ID will be passed. This function will be called, and the task would be deleted. Now just let's reload it, see if everything works properly. You have delete. Let's delete it. Okay, not found. So 2 was not found. /2 was not found. Oh, /2 not found. Let's use slash instead of the parameters. Reload this. Okay, yeah, some problem that I'll check. It should work, but yeah. So basically, we put this one and it works. Now, whatever task I have to delete, it just goes on, calls this. If I check this link, it's delete /3, so ID number 3 will be deleted. Now, if I add a new task done, I'll say add task, and it's delete done. If I go there, ID is 4, so whenever I click on this route would be called, and the task would be deleted. That's it.